Hey guys, good morning. In this particular video, we're going to be going over parallel and perpendicular lines, an introduction, and we're going to be looking at a sound argument, mathematical argument, as to what makes a parallel and what makes a perpendicular line. So let's dive into this. So in order to do so, we are going to be finding the equation of our blue line. So I'm going to use the pen tool and let's start finding the equation. So don't forget, we always need to look at the y-intercept and then find 2 points to use as slope. So the slope is up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. So I'm going to do y is equal to 1x, and then we're going to choose plus 0. You could also write this as y is equal to x or 1x. And now let's look at the red line. So our red line is hanging out here, and it's crossing my y-intercept at -3. And my slope here is also up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. So y is equal to 1x, and then we have -3 to represent that y-intercept, or you could put y is equal to negative x, positive x, my bad, -3. So some things that I noticed is that the lines are parallel, they're never touching. And then also something to start looking at is the slopes were the exact same. So I had a positive 1x for my blue line and a positive 1x for my red line. Could that be something that I'm going to end up making with my mathematical argument as to what makes lines parallel? Okay, taking a look at number 2, we have a perpendicular line, which means they cross at a 90-degree angle. So let's go ahead and take a look at our blue line's equation. So in this particular graph, we have the blue line here crossing at the y-intercept, and the second point that we're going to use is up here. We're going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 1, 2, 3. So 4, and then remember that whenever you go to the left, that represents negative. So your equation would be y is equal to -4/3, because you always put the rise over the run, x plus 0. Okay, now let's take a look at my red line. So again, we're also starting here at the y-intercept being 0, and let's use these 2 points here. And in this case, we're going up 1, 2, 3, and over 1, 2, 3, 4. So that would be y is equal to 3/4 x plus 0. So some things to notice here about the slope is they are first opposite. So one is negative and the other is a positive slope. And then the second thing to notice is that the fractions are flipped, which means that the first one is 4/3 and that second one was 3/4. So let's dive back into our mathematical vocabulary, and the correct mathematical term for a flipped fraction would be a reciprocal. So they are opposite and reciprocals. Okay, so we're going to dive into the next question to see if we can find a sound argument for our parallel lines. So for parallel, again, I'm going to find the equation for the blue line. So we're starting here at -1 and going down 1 over 2, down 1 over 2. So y is equal to -1/2 x minus 1 for that y-intercept. My red line then, go over here. I'm starting here at +2, and it's also going down 1 over 2, down 1 over 2. So that is y is equal to -1/2 x, and then plus 2 would be my equation here for that line. So again, we're not too worried about what the y-intercept is looking like. The key to finding and discovering or making an argument for parallel and perpendicular lines is going to be the slope. So in this case, we need to see if they're the same for parallel. So they're both negative. That is true, and then they both have the same numerical values for the rise over run, or your slope is also the same. So they are both negative, and then the slope was also 1 over 2. So if you think about it, if you and your friend are side by side and you're both taking 1 step forward and then 2 steps, and then 1 step and then 2 steps, you are never going to run into each other. Your paths are never going to cross. So for parallel lines, the slope or the rise over the run is the exact same. If they're both positive or they're both negative, but they have to be the same direction, and then also the same numerical values for slope. Okay, so now let's take a look at a sound argument for a parallel line. Perpendicular, I meant. So for perpendicular, but that's the last one that we have left to make a sound argument for. Let's take the blue equation. So the blue is crossing right here at +3, and we're going down 1, 2, and over 1, 2. So it was a negative 2 over 2, which I'm going to go ahead and simplify to negative 1x, and then it crossed here at a positive 3. Okay, and then the red line was here at negative 1, and it went up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, or up 2 over 2, which will simplify to 1x, and then it crossed there at negative 1. So something to look at here is first, are they positive? Or are they opposites of each other? So it was 1 positive and 1 negative. That is true. The blue line was negative, the red line was positive, so that panned out. And then also, are they the reciprocals? So that could be a little confusing with this one here, but let's just think back about what is a reciprocal? What is a flipped version of that fraction? So for it to be 1, it's a whole number, so we'll write that 1 over 1. If I was to flip and do the reciprocal of 1 over 1, I'm also going to get 1 over 1. So don't let the slope of 1 trick you. They are technically reciprocals of each other. You just happen to get the same thing whenever you do the reciprocal of 1 over 1. So yes, these two lines here are also perpendicular lines. So again, in order for the graph to be perpendicular, they have to be the opposite and also the reciprocals of each other, or the flipped version of slope. So now let's go ahead and apply that. Let's see if we can do one more. Nope, let's just go ahead and apply that. Y'all got lucky. So in this particular one, nope, I can't move it to go to the next slide. That's okay. You all got lucky this time. Okay, so on this one, we're finding parallel lines. So remember, parallel is the exact same slope. So I'm not trying to trick you on this one. If the slope of number 9 is 1/2, that means my parallel line would also have the slope of 1/2. If my line for the slope is 1/4, my parallel line would also have the slope of 1/4. Same thing here. If my slope was 5, the parallel line would also be 5. If my slope is 3, the parallel line would also be 3. Nothing tricky there, the exact same slope. Now, they may end up giving you a y-intercept to use, so don't freak out there if they happen to do so. If they say that the y-intercept is 3, then you would just put x plus 3 into the equation to complete all the steps that it is requiring you to do. Okay, so now let's take a look at the next one. Okay, so we have perpendicular slopes here. So let's remember that a perpendicular slope is the opposite and the reciprocal. It has to be both. So if we have the slope of 1/2 and it's positive, the reciprocal of that would be negative, or opposite of that would be negative, and the reciprocal would be 2 over 1 or just negative 2. Okay, same with this one. We have the opposite, so it would be negative, and then the reciprocal or the flip fraction would be 4. Here we have the opposite, which would be negative, and then the flipped fraction, opposite, which would be negative, and then the flip fraction, which also means the reciprocal. Now, same for this, if they happen to say that the y-intercept for the equations has to be 5, then we would just add x plus 5 to that to finish out my equation with the same or reciprocal slope, perpendicular slope, and then also adding in the correct y-intercept. So let's take a look at what your assignment could look like today. So you are going into the Math 1 Google Classroom. Your video will be located here in the slides. You have the Monday Intro to Parallel and Perpendicular Lines and the Kami app here in Google Classroom, and then also an exit ticket completing your parallel or perpendicular line. So you have 2 assignments to complete today, and all of that will be located into your lesson materials. If you need anything, make sure you make a private comment or also email me, but let's just do a brief recap. Parallel uses the exact same slope. So if it's negative, the other one's got to be negative, and the exact same numerical values for your rise over your run. Perpendicular is the opposite, and then also the reciprocal, which just means the flipped version of the slope, the rise over run. Best of luck on today's assignment.